give you the second one quick, and then we'll go out. Miss Watts, you violated the law when in your court with your bailiff. That was false testimony given in your court when your bailiff lied that day in your court and said, I never told him you'd be dismissed after you didn't have to come back this afternoon. He lied. He lied and gave false testimony. And according to your court order, Miss Watts, you illegally had handcuffs put on me at my house. That's enough for you to resign from the bench, dear. Now, John, do you have I called Judge Lloyd Neal. He's still a county judge. And I complained to Judge Lloyd Neal. Also, I called other representatives when this happened. So, I don't know if he'd remember. But I'm sure you would lie and deny the crime you committed by falsely having me arrested at my house under false testimony because the bailiff lied in your court. Now you're running again. This is enough. False. If a Hispanic gave false testimony in your court, that's a crime. You would have that man arrested for perjury. But yeah, you were allowed to do that. And because I just told you what happened. So you violated the so-called sacredness of your 117th District Court that day. How many other times you have done it within that court here? I don't know. But that's enough for you to even resign. And if you think I'm making this story up, you just look back on the records of the day of jury duty many years ago. But I did indeed complain to Judge Lloyd Neal about that. So what you did was illegal, dear. What you did was a crime, dear. So you can't wear the robe anymore, according to the law of God. See, you seem to think within this county that certain illegal activities committed by those that are connected. The other day I saw a news thing and it showed some local officials. One who is a judge. I've given his name before, I won't now. I have friends that deal in methamphetamine. And one of those judges is a regular purchaser. So this is what you have in this county. This is what you have here. I gave this statistic many times of Nueces County ranked second most corrupt. I walked over the Harbor Bridge the other day, and I see how they're going to, of course, do the whole new bridge, and I'm wondering, is it going to be worse? Because the way the bridge is now is great. They did the same thing with the Bayfront. They basically destroyed that Ocean Drive. Sure, it used to be beautiful. It's wrecked. I'm thinking, why are these are just aesthetic things. I think they're a sign. You know, Scripture talks about wickedness, and it brings confusion. It prevents people from establishing things. And I think some of this within our local region here that has been uncovered. I didn't want to give the thing on. Chief Markle has a little dog. Little wiener dog, maybe. I haven't seen it. But the dog runs loose on a particular block where the chief lives and went on to other people's properties. No big thing, but there is a leash law here. I went to see Mike the other day, my artist friend. He has two cute dogs. Mike is a good man. And one is a black dog by the name of Bear, but then he had a little brown dog by the name of Carl. Mike said, I don't know why I named him Carl, but that's his name. So I didn't see Mike in a few weeks, but I went the other day. Lives also in the same neighborhood, Chief Markle. We all live in Flower Bluff. But I asked Mike, I said, where's Carl? I was petting the black dog Bear. He says, he was glad I asked and remembered. But he said, John, the other day when I came home, Carl Carl was on the porch. Of course, there's a leash law. And he said, and the dog people picked up Carl. Now, I heard the cops on Jim Lago the other day, one of the officers, say they kind of did a thing. Jim Lago was complaining dogs not on a leash. So, in order to enforce the law, poor Carl is probably at the dog pound to be euthanized. But I thought, but if you're the chief, that's just a small example. Certainly nobody would enforce the law against the police chief and take his little wiener dog who runs loose on the block where the chief lives. Small thing. I don't want the dog to be. But that's it. How come Miss Watts can get away with an illegal arrest here? It's unbelievable that they did that. Because the order from her court by her own bailiff was, you'll be released after this. You don't have to come back this afternoon. That's exactly what he told me. And then you do an arrest? Dear, that's illegal. We can't have corruption like that within this 117th District Court. Verify, call Judge Neal. Do you remember some guy calling you many years ago, Mr. Neal, complaining? Yes. There's your testimony. What you do in this city is when you commit crimes, and I could give you, and I've given you ones worse than that, all of your so-called testimony, documentation, when you are committing them, it's a joke. And you even use false testimony in many of these cases I have spoken about. And when I mentioned that one yesterday, where a lady was driving her friend, and her friend was a shoplifter, and in that case, the cops did pull her over. But the other lady lied and said, oh, my friend's got a medical emergency, lying. But she was irate because the cop did not believe her lie. But this is the thing about women judges. When you had that girl give false testimony against that mechanic, which came out in court, she said he bound her, he tied her up, he held her in. All of that was false. All of it. All of that was false. But because female judges think, yes, but this other man is a man. So you allowed in greater degrees. You see, I talked about that verse from Zechariah. There was this wickedness. And it was the personification of a particular feminine gender in the Hebrew. And I thought, I'm wondering how many of those cases are just women saying, well, maybe that mechanic, it's obvious he didn't kidnap the woman, it's obvious he didn't hold her against her will. All of that was very obvious. But I'm thinking maybe the women judges are like, but, obviously the girl lied, but, she's on our particular agenda. I'm wondering how many of those you do. But look, contact Judge Neal today. Because my false arrest on so-called leave and jury duty, which was, I left because your own bailiff, your own so-called, one of the deputies of the court, said you wouldn't have to come back this afternoon. And Miss Watts herself said in the morning session, one of you will not be back this afternoon. Obviously that was me. I was the only one that said, had an excuse. So they do what they want. You see, you have disgraced your court in that one instance. But the other people that you have done stuff like that to, that are in poverty, or I remember the case of the bishop woman who said that carpenter raped her. But yet the story was, look, that story was fake. And I've covered it before. But I remember when I read the story, I thought, why would she have lied like that? And the only thing that came to my mind was the story of Scripture. The story of Joseph, where he did not want to have sex with Potiphar's wife. As I watched that case, the carpenter himself, the Kingsville carpenter who's now in prison, said, the only thing I can imagine is she asked me to sleep with her that day. And I said, no. When he brought that up, and her case was highly questionable, she said, she's a bishop woman, said this carpenter who she hired, she contacted, kidnapped her and took her all the way to Mexico. But before they got to Mexico, she convinced him to come back. And then she said, she called the police, said he raped her. When the cops went to his home in Kingsville, they knocked on the door, he answered the door. Now, he had a past record, but it was robbery or whatever, maybe in California or something. And he answered the door. Look, if you raped a woman, kidnapped her, went all the way back, dropped her off at her house in Bishop, went back to your house in Kingsville, you'd be worried all night long. Oh no, the cops are coming to get me. But instead, when the cops knocked on the door of Kingsville, he answered. He said, what do you want? We have a warrant for you. It's a warrant for what? Rape. His first response that carpenter did was, if that BITCH is going to accuse me of that, he said, you're going to have a murder charge. And then he ran. That response was not planned, not figured out. That in itself shows you that woman lied. Now you would have had and I'm sure within this county, there was other stuff that they had that showed she lied. But that was one Skirka who's highly corrupt. So now, Miss Watts, you and your cabal have been alliances to all of that. You cannot be a judge anymore, dear. This one instance that, in my case, disqualifies you from being a judge. Because you arrested me. If I went to your house and put handcuffs on you under false pretense, I would be charged with kidnapping. But that's exactly what you did in this particular jury duty case. That's exactly what you did to me. You should be removed from the bench for that and should not run for re-election, dear.